Okay, so this is going to be another kind of long one. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be going through a bunch of suggestions that I think could fix the in-game economy in War Thunder. Now, I want to put some heavy asterisks and caveats on this here. I'm not going to be talking about in-game features, in-match features. For example, there are people who are unhappy about like the volumetric damage model. I'm not going to be talking about that. There are people who don't like drones in ground battles. I'm not going to be talking about that. Like air-to-air missile nerfs and tweaks to the radar cross-section model. I'm not going to be talking about any of that stuff. I'm specifically going to be looking at the research and Silver Lion economic model in the game. Now, the first, and of course the problems that need to be addressed are myriad. If you've played the game for more than a couple of weeks, I'm sure you're aware, of where all the problems are. Just in short, rewards are too low, costs and penalties are too high, rewards are often capped, and it's just too damn grindy. Like basic tasks just take too much damn time. Victory is not rewarded enough, and failure is punished too hard. So these are a bunch of suggestions that I'm sort of putting in this video and sending off to the snail. I'm sure nothing will happen, but I gotta try. And I want to point out again, this is, sort of the disclaimer here. If Gaijin hired me tomorrow and gave me unlimited power, put me in charge of fixing War Thunder's economy, these steps I'm talking about in this video would not be the end. It would be the beginning of a community discussion and a community engagement. I don't think that any one person in a game with as large a player base as War Thunder has, I don't think any one individual person is qualified or should be making, the arbitrary decisions about some structural elements like this. It should be a collaborative process, and I would use these things I'm going to suggest in this video as a starting point in community discussions. I also want to sort of refresh for those who don't know me, don't know my background, might be new to the channel. In addition to being a gamer, outside of the gaming world and outside of having a YouTube channel, my regular day job career is in the field of information technology. However, I'm also a politician. I have a background in economics. I'm a member of the American Economics Association, and I have a business degree. So I'm sort of coming at this from a niche angle that people in the game development world usually don't have. And that's fine. Why should they? I'm not a plumber. I don't know how to fix pipes. So the first suggestion I'm going to make is to have a reserve vehicle available at each rank of the tech tree. Now, here's what I'm talking about. Here's the Chinese air tree, for example, right? I'm talking about taking a vehicle, and the specific vehicles in this example aren't important. It could be anything. Taking a vehicle and in each rank of the tech tree and adding it as a reserve vehicle that is granted to the player for free when they reach the eligibility criteria to research that rank of the tech tree. Like right now, for example, I think, to get like from rank 4 to rank 5 in the tech tree, you have to research, you have to research like 5 vehicles in rank 4 before you can start researching things in rank 5, something like that. Once you have those number of vehicles unlocked and you can start researching things in the next rank, you are automatically given for free the reserve vehicle for that rank. The reserve vehicles of that rank would have either dramatically reduced or eliminated repair costs. Now, let's talk about the role that the reserve vehicles play in the game right now. If you think about it ostensibly, the reserve vehicles are there as a vehicle of last resort. Regardless of where you are in the tech tree, if you go broke, you can still take out and fly a reserve biplane no matter what. Or a P-26 pea shooter. You can still take out a reserve aircraft basically no matter what, and use it, to get to gain some Silver Lions and rewards to get yourself back into your regular vehicles. How many matches do you think it's going to take in a reserve biplane to grind up enough Silver Lions and everything to get flying back out in like a Gloucester Meteor again? Like rank 5 jets or something. Quite a few. Having a reserve vehicle that's automatically granted at each tier, at each rank of the tech tree, would provide players a vehicle of last resort in that rank so that they could get their Silver Lions going again if they run broke or something, without necessarily going back to biplanes and having to grind for like 2 weeks, just to get your Silver Lions again. Or maybe you need to grind Silver Lions to crew a vehicle or to purchase a new vehicle that you just unlocked. You're able, of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, in theory, you can get higher rewards hour over hour out of a higher tiered vehicle. And that could be a role that the reserve vehicles, at the different tiers could fill. The details of what those vehicles are, what features they had, and all that, would have to be ironed out. This is a conceptual idea, not a final set of details. But I think this has a lot of potential of sort of easing the transition additionally, in addition to, having like a vehicle of last resort. It would ease the transition as somebody goes up the tech tree so that they could learn the features that might be present in a successive rank of vehicle without necessarily going broke from repairs. Like once you get up to like rank 5, or rank 6 or wherever, you could start learning, like for aircraft, you could start learning how radar sets work, learning how to use rear aspect infrared missiles without necessarily going broke. Because, like, let's face it, right? If you're going up through the tech tree and, like, your first supersonic jet with radar and missiles or something ends up being, like, the F-104, you are not going to figure out what the hell you're doing before you run out of those 10 free repairs you get with a new vehicle. Having a reserve vehicle at rank 5 would allow you to maybe learn some of that stuff and figure out what the heck you're doing before you're thrown to the wolves and you go broke in Silver Lions and have to go back to reserve biplanes just to try and get enough Silver Lions to fly the F-104 again and still get your butt kicked because you don't know what you're doing and you can't live long enough to learn. That sucks. That's difficult. But so again, this, having a reserve vehicle at each rank and how that would fit into the overall structure of the game is an early idea, and it's one that I think could help. Okay, my next suggestion would be to introduce equilibrium rewards. Now, this is addressing a very specific problem with the in-game economy right now, that if you go out and you achieve a 1-to-1 ratio in, like RB, you still can lose with a lot of vehicles a significant amount of Silver Lions. Structurally speaking, and I've put up several videos discussing this particular point, so I'm just gonna condense it into the Cliff Notes explanation here. From a structural standpoint, if you fly a vehicle out into a match, you get 1 kill and you get shot down once. You have achieved a 1-to-1 equilibrium. You should not be losing Silver Lions. Now, I understand there are some caveats to this in a free-to-play game like War Thunder. They need to structure it so that it's slightly more difficult, so that you have to try a little bit harder to gain Silver Lions and all that. So let's say, for the purposes of the larger structure of the economy, that if you go out, you get a 1-to-1 ratio in a match that you win or that you have a premium account for, you've got, the applicable bonuses. You shouldn't be losing Silver Lions from that. You should breaking even in terms of like your contribution to the mission should at least break you even in terms of your Silver Lions income, regardless of any other factors. Achievements you get beyond breaking even, if you get a second, a third, a fourth kill, that's what should be getting you extra rewards. And by the same token, if you go out and you just get destroyed immediately, you're taking the L and you're coming away with a full repair bill, and you're probably not getting anything out of that match. Now, the idea of an equilibrium reward would be for the first kill that you get, you automatically are rewarded with the repair cost of your vehicle. So instead of your first kill being worth 1,000 Silver Lions, your first kill and only your first kill is worth whatever the repair cost of your vehicle is. So if you're in a vehicle with a repair cost of 7,000 Silver Lions, you fly out, you shoot down a plane. That first plane you shoot down, boom, 7,000 Silver Lion reward. You have broken even, you have reached an equilibrium. So if you get shot down, you will still break even. And if you don't get shot down, you're getting a good reward. You're actually pulling in some good income. And then the successive kills you might get, the second, the third, the fourth, would have regular rewards. So that, you'd still be getting rewarded as you achieved more, but you at least would not be going broke if you achieved that equilibrium. Another variation on that could be a maximum repair cost if you got at least one kill, where if you go out and you achieve at least one kill, your maximum repair cost would be equal to whatever you earned in that match, so that at a very worst case, you would break even on Silver Lions at the end. No gain, no loss. And of course, you'd have to tweak that like for bombers and ground attack aircraft, where instead of getting like an air-to-air kill in a dogfight, it would be maybe for the first air-to-air kill you get, or the first base you destroy. Something like that. Again, this is the beginning of a discussion, not the end of a discussion. But I think having some form of an equilibrium reward that would stop you from losing Silver Lions and going bankrupt for having average performance would go a long way towards repairing a lot of other problems in the in-game economy. Right now, if you go out and you make an average contribution to the match, and by definition, and the elitists can just go pound sand. This is just a mathematical fact. By definition, if you get one kill and one loss, you take out one opponent and then you get shot down, you by definition have average performance. You have reached average performance. That should not be punished. Average performance should not net you the L. If you go out and just immediately get destroyed, you're 0 for 1, then you're back to hangar with the full repair bill, and that sucks. Try again. If you go out and get 6 kills and don't get shot down once, you should be making bank off that. Not struggling to, it shouldn't take 6 kills to break even on a repair bill if you get shot down. So that's the idea behind having some sort of an equilibrium system in place, whether it be a cap on repairs or a minimum reward for your first element of mission success. Next up, dramatic BR decompression. And I mean dramatic. And this is something that, when the developers have had some of those videos that they've done with like Q&A from the community and all that, they have dismissed this out of hand. Just saying, nope, not even going to talk about it. And that's a big problem. As recently as last year, during one of the Q&A with the developers, Mr. Bulanikov, War Thunder's main producer, just said flat out, no, we're not gonna decompress the BRs and raise the cap. That's a problem, and it's something that absolutely needs to happen. Right now in the air trees, the battle ratings go from 1.0 to 12.0. That needs to be dramatically stretched out to at least 15.0, maybe 16.0. It needs to be dramatically stretched out, and every vehicle in the game needs to be reevaluated. And there are a number of reasons for this. Now, some of the other suggestions I'm going to be talking about here are going to like normalize repair costs and everything. The way that you prevent certain vehicles from becoming too good under a more egalitarian cost structure is through the matchmaker, not through the economics. If a vehicle is overperforming, you don't jack up the repair costs. You don't increase the penalties for using it with average performance. You correct the overperforming through the matchmaker. That's assuming that it's even actually overperforming at all, or that the overperforming is even a problem. One of the ways, and there's another one I'm going to get to later, one of the ways you can use the matchmaker to correct some of these issues is with the dramatic BR decompression. You know, if you, like right now, I'm going to use the Hawker Hunters as an example. The snail doesn't really know what to do with them. They're in a weird BR range where they can still get absolutely destroyed by most of the stuff they face. But if you move them down, they're just going to completely dominate everything that they face. So what do? Well, with the BR structure the way it is now, your options are very limited. There's only so far, there's only so many different places you can put them. If you had a larger battle rating scale from like 1 to 15 instead of 1 to 12, you would have a little bit more breathing room to try and place them in a position relative to other vehicles that was balanced a little bit better. The negative consequence of BR decompression, would, in theory, and there's no way to know if this would actually happen, would, in theory, be longer queue times. And that was the reason that BVVD and some of the other developers have said, repeatedly over the years, is the reason they just categorically refuse to decompress the battle rating system. Their belief is that players would not tolerate, a 1 minute queue instead of a 20-second queue. I don't believe that's true. I ran a poll on my channel here about 6 months ago. Heck, it might have even been longer than that, where I just flatly asked, would you tolerate longer queue times up to, like a minute or longer or whatever, if it meant that you were getting more fair matches through the matchmaker? If you were paired in a more fair way, if you didn't have a subsonic gunslinger jet getting tiered up against Mach 2 interceptors with air-to-air missiles, which is unfair by any metric, to avoid that unfair nonsense, would you be willing to wait a little bit longer for a match? And the results were like 95% yes. So I'm willing to bet that if you put this idea out to the community at large, that the community at large would be heavily skewed towards people who would be willing to wait an extra minute in order to get into a match that wasn't, or at least had less risk of just getting a complete seal clubbing one way or the other. And by the same token, there are aircraft that if you get a full down tier, there's nothing that can touch you. And I don't want that either. I don't enjoy just going seal clubbing in a match with no challenge whatsoever. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of players also wouldn't like that. If you're in an F-86 and you're routinely getting matched against World War II props, that's going to be kind of stupid and it's going to get old real quick. You know, there's almost no point to that. And I wouldn't want that. That's dumb. But if you don't do something about BR compression, that would eventually happen. Because let's say the BR cap stayed at 12.0. Well, War Thunder continues for another couple of years. Where do you put the F-22 Raptor? If, let's say, the BR only goes up to 13.0. Well, the F-22 Raptor is going to outclass everything at BR-12 right now, like, to the point where those vehicles should never be facing it. So they're going to move down to 10.7. I'm sorry, they're going to move down to like 11.7. And then those are going to start to completely destroy everything else that's at 10.7. So all the 10.7 stuff is going to move down to 10.3. And this repeats until it all gets squished in the middle. And that's how we got to where we're at with BR compression. So the BR structure needs to be dramatically decompressed with every aircraft, every vehicle, ground vehicle, helicopters, all of it, completely reassigned. Whether that's done arbitrarily and then adjusted over a period of a few months, you know, based on statistic results or something, or whether it's done initially in the first round based on the player statistics that Gaijin loves to use as their justification for everything that screws you over. You know, whatever the case is, the BR system needs to be dramatically decompressed. And I'm going to put an addendum onto this. They've claimed that this next one is impossible, but I don't believe that for a second. Because aircraft have different battle ratings if they're used in arcade battles versus realistic versus sim. I'm going to say aircraft need a different battle rating if they're used in ground battles. For example, an A-10 is not currently matched up very well with the ground vehicles at its battle rating. Or some of the other, like, entry-level jets, like a Supermarine Attacker, can be placed into a match where it's up against, like, surface-to-air missiles. I mean, that's insane. You know, you should never have a situation where, like, aircraft from the 1960s are getting paired into matches against, like, modern, past the millennium surface-to-air missile systems like the Panther, the Pantsir. You know, that's just crazy. So the trees need to be, in addition to just having the BR decompressed, there needs to be a separate ranking for aircraft for their BR when they're used in a close air support ground battles lineup. Next, in addition to some of these other factors, one of the things that Gaijin has constantly said they wanted to avoid are some vehicles being too good for grinding and flooding the matchmaker at a particular tier. They don't want, you know, a battle to just be nothing but the same vehicle. Like, as happened with the TU-4 when it was first introduced. You'd spawn into an air battles match playing any tech tree other than the Soviets, and if you were at the right BR range, the entire enemy team was TU-4s. That's how it got the nickname as the Tumor. Now, they say that this is something they want to avoid, and yet at the same time, they sell premium vehicles that flood certain brackets. You know, if you go into the right bracket, you're facing nothing but F5Cs, A10s, Su-25Ks, A5Cs, you know, the premium vehicles right at around rank 10. You go a little lower, you fly anyone but Germany. The entire team is, was it the Ju-288 or whatever, that German prop bomber premium that's incredibly efficient. So they've created, oh, and the Wyvern, that's another one in that bracket. So they say they want to avoid having no variety, you know, in what you're, in the vehicles that are in a match. But they've created this situation where in certain brackets, there is no variety in what you're playing. Well, the way to get around that is to do what they did before with the TU-4 and the strategic bombers. They changed the matchmaker so that there can be no more than 4 strategic bombers in a match. Well, just change it again so that there can be no more than 4 of the same plane on the same team, or 3 of the same plane on the same team, or 5, or whatever. That would prevent a bracket in the matchmaker getting flooded with the same vehicle. Like, I'm just going to make up, like, let's say after the BR decompression and all these other changes and everything else, let's say that the MiG-19 PT turned out to be some incredibly efficient grinder. It was overperforming in the player stats. It was doing incredibly well, and everyone was flying it as a result. And you know, the BR 9.7 or wherever it would be after BR decompression, that bracket was just flooded with everybody flying the MiG-19 PT. Well, you just cap the matchmaker to only allow 4 of them into the same match, and that problem is immediately solved. That doesn't even have to be anything new. They've done that before. There is precedent for it, you know, in changes they've made in the past to address shortcomings. That would also mean, of course, that they need to cap the premium vehicles so that there's only 4 F5Cs in the same match, only 4 MiG-23 MLs in the same match. I think the ML's the new premium one. Only 4 F4Ss in the same match. And I don't know if they'd be willing to do that. You know, I mean, frankly, I don't think they'd be willing to do any of the changes I'm talking about here. But this one at least has a little bit of precedent. They've done it before. They can do it again. Next, repair costs should be normalized by vehicle rank and have absolutely no connection whatsoever to player statistics. Period. I'm just going to make up some numbers here as a for example. You set the base repair cost of a rank 1 vehicle at 500 Silver Lions. Rank 2, you bring it up to 1,000. Rank 3, you go up to 1,500. Rank 4, you go up to 2,000. And continue that, like, you know, just increasing by whatever percent as the ranks go up. And all of the vehicles in that rank have a normalized repair cost for that rank, without any regard to the warshipped player statistics that the snail currently bases everything on. This would have a number of effects, I think, that would solve some problems on its own, and it would complement other things. And of course, the number one consideration with normalizing the repair cost, the baseline would have to be way lower than it is right now. Way lower. And you'd have to structure it in such a way that, you know, again, sort of having some synergy with the equilibrium rewards that I mentioned earlier here in the suggestions. The repair costs would have to be such that if you go out in a couple of matches and just get creamed and you lose a whole bunch of Silver Lions, it should not take you a week to recover from that. You know, if you want to fly the Sagittario 2, or you want to fly the B-29, or you want to fly anything in the Swedish tech tree, and you have an afternoon of bad matches, that should not bankrupt your account in Silver Lions and force you back to reserve vehicles. Like, you should have to try to be forced back to reserve vehicles, whether it's the reserve biplanes in rank 1 like we have now, or whether it's a reserve vehicle at each rank of the tech tree like I've suggested here. But the repair costs should be normalized across the board, all vehicles in the same rank, or like maybe at the same tier of each rank. You know, like with some of the tech trees, you've got like 4 levels of vehicles inside that tech tree that need to get researched through before you get to the next rank. You know, maybe consider those like the tiers of each rank. Maybe the repair costs just within each tier are normalized. But the point is that the repair costs should be based on, the rank of the vehicle in the tech tree, not the player statistics. If you want to play a vehicle that you are not necessarily very good at, you should not be punished just because other people are good with that vehicle. Period. Plain and simple. Next, as a principle, they should increase the rewards for using struggle bus vehicles instead of increasing the penalties for using overperforming vehicles. Take, again, the Sagittario 2, a good vehicle. The way that Gaijin balances that right now is to jack up the repair cost so it's insanely high. And their stated reason for doing that is to prevent people from using the Sagittario 2 as an overpowered grinder. I think that's a bad motivation. They shouldn't be trying to stop that. If they really want to stop that, there are other ways, such as adjusting the matchmaker, as I mentioned before, no more than 4 or however many of any one vehicle on the same team, so on and so on. You should use those other methods instead of lowering the rewards and jacking up the penalties. One of the other things that is a very easy temptation for them is to take an overperforming vehicle like that and lower the reward coefficients. Don't do that either. Bad snail. Bad. What you should be doing is, instead of penalizing good vehicles, you should be providing extra rewards and incentives for players to try and do well with less good vehicles. I'm going to say, for example, the F86K is not an especially strong vehicle most of the time. So you could take a vehicle like that and increase the reward coefficients for it. So if a player is able to go out and have a good match in that vehicle, they get higher rewards than the same match in the Sagittario 2. This would achieve multiple objectives. It would provide incentive for players to try out a wider variety of vehicles, which is something that, Gaijin has said they want to do. They've stressed multiple times they want to have a variety of vehicles in every particular match. And at the same time, it would stop punishing people who want to try out a vehicle that they might not be good with, but that other players are good with. And that would again contribute to having a wider variety of vehicles in the match. And it would actually allow people to play something like a B29, a Sagittario 2, whatever. And there are many examples, like anything in the Swedish tech tree. There are many examples throughout the tech trees of vehicles where, the statistics on the vehicle at some point in the past were really skewed. And Gaijin overcompensated for that by jacking up the repair cost, and now nobody plays it because the repair costs are so high. And because not enough people play the vehicle, there aren't enough new statistics of people using the vehicle well or poorly to adjust that repair cost again. So the whole idea of adjusting repair costs based on player stats is fundamentally flawed. Bad snail, bad. So don't do that. As a balancing factor, instead of doing that nonsense, do these other steps, but increase the rewards for using shitty vehicles and decrease the penalties for using good ones. Next, this one is simple, but also a little deep. Remove any and all reward caps or diminishing returns for player activity. Now, a lot of the changes that I'm suggesting here would have a net effect of making the game less of a struggle and less of a chore for, let's say, the bottom 20% of the player base, as well as the middle 50%. Make the game a lot less grindy, reducing some of the penalties for not doing so well, and all that. allow players to play the game and have fun, even if they're not in like the top 5%. And to be very clear, everyone who plays the game should be able to at least have some chance of having some fun. You know, I mean, of course, the bottom 5% of the player base is always going to struggle and be chased out no matter what you do, no matter how well things are balanced. That's just the nature of anything that's competitive. However, you shouldn't be punishing everyone who's not in like the top 5%. Now, the flip side of that is what this is. You should also not be holding back those people who are in the top 5-10% of the player base. If you go out into a mission and you pull off a miracle and you get 14 kills, your 14th kill should be worth just as much as your 3rd or 4th kill in terms of mission points, in terms of research points, and Silver Lion rewards at the end of the match. Removing caps and diminishing returns would have the net effect of providing even more incentive for players to try harder. And it would alleviate any potential for one and done if you implemented the equilibrium rewards where your first kill would cover your repair costs. You could reduce any potential negative side effects of that by, again, allowing for there to be no cap for the rewards on player activity. And frankly, if somebody's going out into a match and they're in like, you know, the top 10% of the player base, they should be getting increased rewards. I mean, their rewards should be proportionally higher than the bottom 90% of the player base. Just as much as you need to protect the average players from just getting screwed, you also need to protect the top-end players from getting held back. Like, if somebody's incredibly good at War Thunder, they should be able to unlock vehicles through research points faster. They should be able to bank up more Silver Lions to crew those vehicles in different slots and move them around and, you know, buy the upgrades after they've unlocked them. Like, those chores and tasks should be easier if they're able to go out into a match and pull higher results. Plain and simple. Remove any and all caps or diminishing returns based on player activity. Next, this one is also very simple, but it's also a little bit more deep. Research point requirements to unlock vehicles needs to be reduced across the board. High tier, low tier, mid tier, ground, naval, air. Helicopter, especially helicopter. Research point requirements need to be reduced across the board. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. In that letter that they put out a couple of days ago, they said that one of their primary considerations in structuring all this is that, you know, going up through the tech tree and getting to top tiers should not take too long or be too quick. I would argue that as more vehicles are added into the game, that grind gets proportionally longer. And as more higher tiered stuff gets added into the game, it gets disproportionately longer. If you have to research through even more vehicles that are all costing way too much to get to the top of the tech tree, it's going to take you a hell of a lot longer in terms of your time investment into the game. You know, not even factoring in your actual player performance. You know, assuming that you're like dead in the middle. You're doing, you know, you're going out doing 1-to-1 every match or whatever. By reducing the RP costs, you can use that as a way to compensate for the fact that so many new vehicles keep getting added into the game. You know, and I'm just going to throw this out there as an example. You know, when I started playing War Thunder years and years ago, like, the individual tech trees didn't even have 100 vehicles in them. I mean, not even close. You know, the American tech tree when I first started maybe had like 40, I think, at most. You know, And there was, in Gaijin's own words, they structured the economy. There was a certain amount of time they wanted it to take. This is what they've said, and I'm taking it at face value. They've said that they structured it so there was a certain amount of time they wanted it to take for a new player to get up into the top ranks. Well, the top ranks are a lot higher now, and it takes a lot more vehicles to get there. And those individual vehicles are way more expensive on a one-to-one basis. So every successive content update, the amount of research points needed to like unlock an entire tech tree goes up dramatically, which dramatically increases the amount of time it would take. And they've done nothing to increase rewards or decrease costs to compensate for that. So I'm saying that that's one of the things that should be done. The research point costs for unlocking new vehicles should be dramatically reduced across the board. High tier, low tier, mid tier, ground, air, naval, helicopter, all of it. Next is another one that's relatively simple, but it's a little bit more deep. The rewards for flying helicopters, for player activity in helicopters in every game mode need to be dramatically increased. And when I say dramatically, I mean like by a factor of 10, dramatically increased. And here's the reason. Right now, there is no activity you can engage in with helicopters that will give you an hour-over-hour level of research points, even close to equivalent of grinding tanks, grinding planes, and probably grinding boats. There's just nothing you can do. Now, here's what I mean. If you want to grind aircraft, you can get your lineup and just keep queuing for Air Arcade over and over. You can just you can get your one plane and keep queuing for Air Realistic over and over. You can get your lineup, keep queuing for Sim over and over. And just keep doing your thing. And every match, assuming you don't just, get immediately shot down, but every match that you're actually able to do something, you are getting some research points and making some progress. There's nothing comparable with helicopters. And like, even when they had the helicopter PvP mode, which was just awful for 1,000 reasons, that should never be considered, a viable way to grind helicopter research if you're flying anything but the KA-50. What are the two ways that you can gain research points with helicopters right now? Number one is the PvE helicopter game mode that's kind of a hybrid between sim and arcade. Well, that's actually a PvP game mode because you are competing against the other players to destroy a finite number of ground targets. And a lot of the time, it's just a race. If you have a faster helicopter and or longer range weapons, you will win. Has nothing to do with player skill or any other factors. It is simply a question of the features on the vehicle you are using. Is it faster? Does it have longer range weapons? If yes, then you win. If not, then you have invested whatever amount of time that is and gotten 0. That is simply not a reliable way to get research points for helicopters. And the time investment that you spend, like if you're grinding ground vehicles, let's just assume you're doing RB. You have a lineup of ground vehicles in RB, or you have your one aircraft in air RB, and you are just grinding ground or air for 2 hours. That level of research points you get for an average level of performance. Let's say you're doing pretty average. You put that same time investment into helicopter PvE, you're not going to get even 1/10 the same amount of research points for average performance for the same amount of time. So the reward coefficients and the research point rewards for player activity in the helicopter PvE mode needs to be dramatically increased, at least by a factor of 10. And when Gaijin first introduced the helicopter PvE modes, you know, one of the community managers on the Content Creator Discord specifically asked us for feedback about it. That was my feedback, is that the rewards need to be increased by a factor of 10, at least, in order to make it a worthwhile way to spend your time. Next, we come to using helicopters as close air support in ground battles. Well, you've got two options. You can use the helicopter for a suicide rocket rush at the start of the game, and it usually is a suicide rocket rush. You will very rarely actually get kills, and you will more often than not get shot down very quickly. That will get you almost nothing. You will get very little from, you know, every match helicopter rocket rush. The alternative is to try and use the helicopter more conventionally as a second or third vehicle in the match after you've built up some spawn points. The problem is you're not going to get enough spawn points every match. Not every match is where you get enough spawn points is going to last long enough for you to go out in the helicopter and actually find targets to attack. And not every match that you're able to get out into the helicopter with some actual weapon loadouts is actually going to have targets left to attack. So you can, again, take an entire afternoon where your intention is to go out and ground RB and grind helicopters, but because you will not necessarily have the opportunity in even, let's optimistically say, a third of the matches, you won't have the opportunity to use the helicopters in their intended way and actually, you know, like rack up, like, let's say 3 or 4 player kills in a good match. There's simply no activity that you can engage in hour over hour with helicopters that will produce the same level of research points as you can with any other vehicle type in the game. The rewards for helicopter player activity in every game mode need to be dramatically increased, and or the research cost of unlocking new helicopters needs to be dramatically decreased. It is the worst grind in the entire game. Lastly, and this is the one with the least amount of specific details, they need to completely rethink how they monetize the game. Now, right now, there are dozens of ways that you can monetize in to War Thunder. You can buy pack vehicles, premium vehicle packs off of the web store. You can purchase Gaijin coins that you use on the marketplace to buy vehicles, skins, whatever. You can buy Golden Eagles that you use for dozens of things. You can use Golden Eagles to get a premium account, to buy some premiums, to speed up researching new vehicles. You can convert GEs into RPs using the convertible RPs. And by the way, that exchange rate is awful. You can use GEs to buy upgrades for vehicles without having to grind them out. You can use GEs to buy consumables. You can buy in advance on the battle pass. You can use GEs to buy skins on vehicles and cosmetic ornaments for ground vehicles and stuff. Tons of ways that you can monetize into the game. And right now, they seem to have structured all of this in such a way that the primary way they want you to monetize in is to get around the shit economy in terms of the research point economy and the Silver Lions economy that we've mostly been discussing here. They want you to monetize in and convert those GEs to research points or to convert those GEs to Silver Lions. That is the exact wrong way to do it. Those are the opposite priorities that they should have. Bad snail, bad. Now, in some of the comments they've made publicly, past and recent, they've sort of indicated that that's their only way, to monetize the game, is by making it pay to not be punitive economically. That's just flat out ridiculous, for a lot of reasons. I'm going to give you a couple examples here. There are tons of other free-to-play games out there on the internet, for PCs, for console, for mobile, that are successful and pulling in ridiculous amounts of money. There are games like Fortnite. There are games like Hearthstone. There are games like Candy Crush. There are tons of games out there with all these different monetization methods. And a lot of the more successful ones have something in common. The core focus of the game is on a positive gameplay experience. The monetization is mostly secondary. You're paying for fun little gimmicky cosmetics that do not impact your routine gameplay experience. Now, a lot of those things are already monetized in War Thunder. If you have a premium account, you get the extra vehicle decal slots. You can buy decals and logos with GEs to stick on your vehicles. You can buy ornaments for ground vehicles. You can buy vehicle skins directly, and so on and so on. You can monetize in and get the keys to unlock the loot boxes. I mean, crates that come out with each expansion that often have vehicle skins and consumable items in them. Those methods of monetizing into the game are already there. And in my opinion, all of that stuff is probably what they should be emphasizing. They should be making those monetization efforts more valuable for the players, providing a little bit more value for it. And frankly, they should be incentivizing a premium account, making the premium account a little bit more worth it, but not necessarily economically. There are a lot of ways that they could do this. For example, what they do now, the premium account gives, in addition to the, the research point bonus and all that stuff, the modifier there, a premium account gives you additional decal slots for your vehicle. Well, that's cool. Maybe it could give you some additional decoration slots as well. Maybe if you had a premium account, you could get a discount when purchasing a premium vehicle, either through the web store or with GEs through the in-game client. Maybe if you had a premium account, you could get a 10% discount across the board on everything you spend Silver Lions on. In my opinion, that alone would entice a lot of people to pay the, $5-10 a month or whatever it would turn out to be for a premium account. The real point I'm getting at is they should be following two core principles for monetization. They should stop having the in-game economy be punitive and stop trying to have people pay to reduce the punitive nature of the economy. And they should try to be increasing the base of players that monetize into the game. Instead of squeezing the whales for that shiny new premium vehicle, for that extra month of premium, for converting those convertible RPs, instead of squeezing the whales for that extra $50, get 100 new players to monetize in for $3 each. And you'll be ahead of the game. That's where I think they should be reprioritizing how they monetize War Thunder and actually make money off of it. Allow and encourage a larger number of players to monetize in a large variety of different ways, and they already do that now. But stop using the economy, the in-game flawed, the structurally flawed economy in the game as a way to just squeeze the whales. That's what needs to end, because it just penalizes players too badly if they can't afford to be a whale. You know, the prioritization on it is just entirely wrong. And that's my economics degree talking, you know, that if they wanted to really build a larger successful community like some of these other games have, you know, like again, I reference Fortnite and Hearthstone as perfect examples. Overwatch is another good example. You know, all these other games out there that are free to play and making ridiculous amounts of money, you know, for the publishers. A lot of them are doing like the loot boxes and the microtransactions that none of us like. But it's working. It's working. They don't need to handicap and artificially screw over player advancement and progression. They don't have to artificially introduce pain in order to squeeze monetization out of the players. And again, in my opinion, both just from a common sense angle and from friends that I know who have played and left War Thunder, in my opinion, the incessant monetization of the in-game economy is what drives players who leave to leave. So stop doing that. Stop chasing away players before they have the opportunity to pay you and become customers. You know, there are probably a significant number of players out there who have left War Thunder because they realize that they are never going to get, in any realistic amount of time, and I mean real world time, like months, years, they are never going to get up to like jet-powered aircraft. They are never going to get up to like some of the later Cold War tanks, or now they're getting into like the early Cold War ships. They're never going to get up to those vehicles without paying hundreds of dollars, or, you know, equivalent in their local currency. And I can't even imagine how bad it is for people who are playing, you know, from a local economy that's not so great. You know, I mean, I'm in the United States. I'm speaking about some of this from the point of view of an American in the American economy. Disposable incomes around the world are very different. I'm keenly aware of that. There are probably an enormous amount of players who are in parts of the world that don't have as much disposable income that would still pay a few units of local currency. I almost said a few dollars. That would almost certainly monetize into the game for some small amount if they'd actually get something worthwhile from it. Broaden the base instead of squeezing the whales. Rethink monetization entirely from scratch. So I've been rambling for a while here. Just to kind of reiterate what I started off with, you know, these are 10 suggestions that I think could dramatically improve the quality of life for the player base in War Thunder, that could dramatically improve the functioning of the in-game economy, that could stop the bleeding of scaring players away, and still find some way for Gaijin to make money without relying on squeezing the whales. I don't necessarily think that this is the end. You know, again, as I mentioned, if they made me king of the game and gave me unlimited power to implement these changes, this isn't necessarily exactly what I would do. I would use these suggestions as the starting point of a larger community discussion. And I really think that that's what they need to do. There needs to be a larger community discussion without posts on the forums being removed, without comments on Reddit being removed or hidden or anything else. You know, there needs to be a larger community discussion about how the in-game economy is structured and, frankly, how the monetization model of the game is set up. And the player experience needs to be placed at a higher priority than the monetization experience. Because if the player experience is good on its own, then the monetization and, frankly, the profits from producing the game will flow naturally as a result. I mentioned some other examples. There are plenty more. I'll shut up. As always, thanks for watching.